Our topic this time will be vectors, and as always we will first start with running the Rustlings command. So cd into your Rustlings folder and do Rustlings watch. You see it's compiling the exercises we've already done. And now here we have the path exercises vex1. So let's do that. We go into the Rustlings folder, exercises, vec and vex1. So let's see. Your task is to create a vector which holds the exact same elements as in the array A. Make me compile and pass the test. So we have a function over here, array and vec, and inside we have an array of type integers, and this is basically the array. And we now have to declare your vector here with the macro for vectors. So vectors actually have their own macros, and you've already seen a macro basically like print line. And the special thing on macros is they always end with an exclamation mark. So that's how you recognize it. So for vectors we have vec exclamation mark, and then you can basically declare it like a normal array, like that. So you basically ask now, what's actually the difference? Why do we need two different things? Like, why don't we just use arrays? And the limitations of arrays is basically it is fixed size, and that's because of something in memory. So arrays will be stored in stack memory, while vecs will be stored in heap memory. I will go into details in a later course, but just to make it clearer for you, I will annotate the types, even if this is not really necessary. So over here we annotate the type of array, and we do that in Rust by doing brackets, then first the type of the values inside the array, i32, semicolon, and then the size of the array, or the amount of values inside the array. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4 elements. That's how we annotate an array. And a vector we annotate like that, vec, and then the type of the values inside the vec, and like that. This is how we annotate a vector. This is a generic, but I will go into that later. So that's basically the difference, is that arrays are fixed in size, while vecs can increase or decrease their amount of values. That's what you see here. When we annotate the types of arrays, we have to specify a size. So then we are returning a tuple, and the tuple holds A, which is of type array, and V, which is of type vector. And that's what you see in the function definition. You see here we have a tuple. It returns a tuple. That's because we have here parentheses. And the first item of the tuple is an array of 4 elements of type integer. And the second element of the tuple is a vector with integer types. So here are the tests basically, and we should compile it and see if everything's working, and that's compiling over here, and we can go ahead. So vex2, and a vector of even numbers is given. Your task is to complete the loop so that each number in the vector is multiplied by 2. Make me pass the test. So over here we have a function vecLoop, and it takes as argument a vector of integer values, and it stores it inside this variable v, which we make mutable. And here we have a for loop. So we basically take the variable v, which is mutable, and put it in a iterator, and this is iter mute. So we have a mutable elements inside the iterator, and this actually lets us iterate through the vector. And also because it's mutable, it lets us modify the values. So I represents the element inside the vec, the I32 elements. So what we basically do to multiply it by 2 is just we have to dereference it, because we are accessing this variable by its value, and we will go into the referencing later. That's to do with a references and memory and stuff like that. And we multiply it by 2 and assign the new value to I again. So what this basically is I equals I times 2. That's basically the short form of this. We multiply I by 2 and then assign the result of this into I, the value. So that's basically it. And then we return v, so that will be the return vec I32. So we have actually modified this vector. Now in the second part we have a function vecMap, which takes a reference of a vector with values of integer type. And as you can see, we don't need to make it mutable because we aren't actually modifying anything in the vector. We are just taking a reference. And reference, we will go into that a little bit later, but that's to do with ownership and borrowing. So you're basically just borrowing this vector. You're not taking ownership over this vector. And what we do here is we take this variable v and put it into an iterator, and then we map over this iterator. And what map does is actually it creates another iterator, and then you have a closure here, and in this parameter we have num. So this is basically the elements of the vector, or a reference to it basically. And then all we have to do is put num times 2, and we don't put semicolons over here because this actually is an expression, so it will be returned on every iteration of map, because map, as I said, will create another iterator, and on every iteration num will get multiplied by 2 and returns that. And then in the end we collect this, because this on its own it returns an iterator, I think. Let me actually check this. So Rust map and it's that, I guess. So map actually returns the value of map, and that's actually, it produces a new iterator. So as you can see, it produces a new iterator. So map produces another iterator, and basically in Rust, iterators are lazy, so they don't do anything on their own. You have to collect them. So we use this function collect, and this will collect the elements, the i32 elements inside a vector. So I guess that's basically it. Let's see if it's compiling. And it is compiling. So I think we are done with vectors. All right. The next topic will be move semantics, and we will do that in a separate video. Until then.